It's time for today's episode of the UGA Sports Live Podcast, recorded in front of a slightly tipsy studio audience at world-famous Champy's Fried Chicken. We will have the latest on Georgia Bulldogs football, basketball, and recruiting. Watch live and send us your questions on the 11 Alive Sports page on Facebook. Be advised this podcast is off the record and not safe for work. Also, be sure to subscribe to the UGA Sports Live Podcast on iTunes and Google Play.
Hey everybody, welcome to the UGA Sports Live Podcast here at Champy's on Baxter Street. Champy's home of the, to me, I'm going to say the world's best fried chicken, nation's best at least. I don't know, maybe someplace in South Asia there's somebody that does it better, but I don't know anybody else that does it better in the States. So home of the nation's best, maybe world's best, maybe universe's best fried chicken that you can get. Come to Champy's on Baxter Street, try it out. We are, it's live, it's Tuesday noonish. We have seen a number more practices. You've been to Charlotte to see a camp. We have a lot to talk about. But first and foremost, we want to tell you to send in your questions. We're going to try to do better this week about answering questions. Sometimes we get on
tangents.
Yes, that's me, my fault. I get on these long tangents and we don't get to as many questions, but we want to do that today. We are joined, as usual, by Coach Jim Donnan, the former head coach of University of Georgia, Hall of Famer, the guy who's the main reason you're all tuning in. Of course, Jake Roos, our recruiting superstar at UGASports.com, and myself, Roddy DeBulsey, the publisher of UGASports.com. Big shout out to Athens Ford, one of our premier sponsors of the show. Aaron Overhead Doors, another big sponsor of the show and the website. Europie, Academia Brewing Company, and Cable East. Those are some of our major sponsors, and we appreciate you folks patronizing.
Yes.
But see, that sounds like you're being mean to them.
I agree. Being patrons of those businesses.
Thank you. That's what I'm looking for.
You're thinking about the Masters.
Yeah. Oh man, how many days till Friday? How many days till Friday?
Thursday's when they start, not Friday.
No, I'm going Friday.
Oh, okay.
I don't care about Thursday.
Exactly.
The hell with Thursday. I'm going Friday. So, like, how long till count the hours backwards? So, of course, Dave McMahon, who's usually in here working, helping us, he's off at the Masters. So, if you're down there this week, folks, and you see a guy flying around on a cart in a blur, trying to get film and tape from one area to the other, that's Dave. So, I want to jump right into the scrimmage that Georgia had this past Saturday. Coming out of that, we had some folks that were there tell us some good things and some bad things they saw. Coach, did anything that you heard about stick out to you?
Well, first of all, in a self-disclosure here, I went to the scrimmage, but I'm not going to say much about it.
That's why I tried. That's
guys. The first time I've told you that I even went, or you'd be busting me up for it. But
yeah.
Basically, the Letterman.
I knew you went. I knew you wasn't going to tell me.
The Letterman were there, and that's why
Okay.
I always like to go see. Got to see a lot of ex-players that played for me, and for Coach Dooley, and for Coach Goff, and for Coach Smart, and some support personnel, which always makes you feel good too, to see your ex-trainers and managers and all, then see their families. It was great. And saw some families of some of the players here that I know, which is always good too, because it's good to see them supported. But I would just say overall, from a coaching perspective, that you want to have a evaluation type deal where you get a chance to really see what these guys can do 11 on 11. Prior to this, they've been doing a lot of stuff where they do segment type deals, one-on-one pass block, one pass rush, stuff like that, and pass coverage against the defensive backs, against the receivers. But 11 on 11, it's a different story, and it was not so much to me of trying to win or lose the game as much evaluate the players based on the defenses they were playing, based on the calls at the offense. And so they were doing some exploratory stuff from the standpoint to see what some of these younger players could do, and also what some of the older players that hadn't had a shot could do. But my overview real quickly is a very athletic-looking team that to have been have had about 5 or 6 padded practices was very advanced as far as the way they were able to look in, as far as going to the line, being ready to run their plays, getting lined up defensively. Weren't a lot of sloppy plays, not too much. The ball was not on the ground. There weren't many penalties. So organization-wise, it was no question that this is a mature team that is got some good leadership with Reed and on the defense and Jake on the offense and, Thomas and these other guys. But I would just say, based on what I saw, there's not much of a drop-off to me from the end of last year. I know the last game we did lose, but I really feel like we got a good continuation of we're going to have to build up on some guys. Some guys that jumped out at me, N'Kobe Dean, really quick, fast, and off the edge. I mean, we got a lot of edge players, that's for sure. And Johnson's still a little bit banged up. I know you said he had a hurt ankle. I'm not sure what's wrong with him, but I think overall we got much better depth in the secondary. It was good to see some of our receivers like Matt Landers and Robertson make some plays in the open field. Tyson Simmons. The young quarterbacks both got a long way to go, but they still got some potential. And overall, I would say, like you mentioned, that nobody got hurt. That's even better. So it was a good day for the Dogs.
Yeah, if you go watch the video that
so everybody put out there that Jim Donnan was talking about what happened in the scrimmage, which I did not want to say.
Everything you said, Kirby said.
I'm supposed to say.
You're supposed to give us something Kirby
that's
didn't
what
say.
I looked at what Kirby said. You got to sign this disclaimer that you don't say anything. I really didn't feel like I said anything that was giving away what we were doing.
No, he mentioned Matt Landers. He mentioned.
I do feel like
that's
a privilege to go to practice when I go. And
well, I know you're not going to give us anything that Kirby won't.
But I just want everybody to understand that
we can try.
We can make some generalities here, yeah. But
well, no,
but I will say that what we did with the wishbone was really good. And some of the stuff we were doing, running a triple stack defense, really looked good.
I heard they brought Paul Johnson in for offensive consultant.
No, we actually did. Now, you of course aren't going to tell us some of the stuff you saw, but we did have some of the former people who were at the scrimmage. They spoke to us and they told us a few things. And we put up a war room at UGASports.com. You can go check it out, 27 cents a day. And
I'm sure that war room says a lot more than what I did.
Yeah, it does. But again, this is because they could do it anonymously. But the first thing we put in there that you mentioned, we saw that there were no injuries. I think that's the number one thing. If you got to the war room, you read that one point, you checked out of it. At least you know that. There are some guys coming back. When we were over there taking pictures, we saw Jermaine Johnson working on he's going through some drill. He was dressed out. For a guy that's got a sprained ankle.
I always like to see him out there at least trying to go like that. And that's the one thing that, as you say things, I'm going to interject this. Yeah. Very encouraging to me that once fall camp starts, we're going to add David Marshall, Zeus, Rochester, Johnson, those four guys to the team right away. Walk in any place in America and play. So we're playing without those four right now. But we brought this point out, and you go back to the war room, then I'm not going to say anything. That having these 14 guys here and giving them the reps of the guys that we've lost, either through graduation or going to the draft, really helps your depth. And I have to tell you, just overwhelming competition in the secondary is overwhelming talent level. Now, whether they're going to be able to make it in the system and all, but boy, we got some good-looking kids on the hoof in the secondary.
Yeah, that's actually one of our sources said the same thing. He was pointing about the secondary, and he said, look, Kirby Smart after the scrimmage mentioned that the secondary gave up a couple big plays, but he said, do you realize how many plays they ran? Which we didn't because we weren't there. So he said, look, you're going to run that many plays, occasionally somebody's going to get beat, but this guy, and trust me, this particular source understands the secondary and wide receivers very well. So this was
Mel Tucker was there?
No, I wish, but it was somebody who I trust implicitly, and he said, "Look, that secondary is stacked, and what the competition Georgia's going to have back there is very impressive." And I threw in the part about the he basically mentioned that this team plays the ball in the air better. And
right, I would that
like
too.
If you that's thrown around a lot, and I would like you to kind of explain that because I threw it in there and without an explanation.
Well, the thing about playing the ball in the air is it's one thing to cover a guy and then the ball be thrown and then him catch it. there's a lot of guys that can make the tackle, but can you play through his shoulders? Can you knock the ball down? When the ball's in the air, can you catch it and secure it? You're only going to get so many chances to intercept the pass, and when you got a chance, you got to do it. So you got to have the same kind of hands that receivers have at least, because the ball's coming at a lot more velocity than what the secondary coach is throwing the ball to you in drills and all. So playing the ball in the air, to me, it's being able to adjust with your depth perception, your eye locations. So, like, one of the things I always tell a guy, when you break for a route, you always want to turn your head and look where you know the quarterback's going to be letting the ball go, so you don't have to adjust your head. So if you're breaking, let's just pretend, a lot of people will be riding in the road. I don't want to drive off the road here when they're listening, but as you break to the right and the quarterback's back behind you, you don't want to put your head over to the outside and then have to turn your head again, because one of the reason outfielders miss balls is because when you're running, your eyes are going to, juggle a little bit there. So you need to, right before the catch, you need to get on the, not so much on the balls of your feet, but more back on the heels where your head's steady. So steady your head and turn your head in the direction that you know the ball's coming, and then put your hands in the proper place. And that's the same thing for a defensive back. He doesn't know where the ball is going to be launched or the timing of it, but he's got to be ready to, when he puts his feet and makes a break on the ball, he needs to be in a position where he's playing the ball in the air just like the receiver is. So I hope that it just makes that understandable.
No, it does. And like I said, our source was mentioning he didn't know who everybody was numbers-wise. But he was talking about just the sheer number of people down there and the plays that they made. So apparently there's some good plays out there. Another guy mentioned, he said that Matt Landers had some good plays and some bad ones. We had very, I don't say differing, going off what Coach Smart said, but the discussion of the quarterbacks. One guy said Stetson Bennett was out there and looked good even though he had very little time. And you think about Georgia's second, because he was running the second string offense going up against the number one defense.
Sure.
Tougher.
So you've got Adam Anderson, Brenton Cox guys. Well, actually Brenton wasn't in the scrimmage. I'll mention that in a minute. But you have very good pass rushers on that number one defense going up against your number two offensive line. Now the number two offensive line is pretty good, but it's not. There's kind of a fall off on the tackles. You don't have Andrew Thomas out there. You don't have Isaiah Wilson out there. You have Owen Condon and Cade Mays. Guys like that.
Cade was playing guard first team.
Well, see, there you go.
But here's the thing about those two quarterbacks. Now, we can just come to the chase so we can answer. The thing that Bennett's got a little advantage in the fact he's gone through a spring before and a fall before, and he knows the system, even though there might be a few changes in it. So he knows the play. So it's a lot more – it's like taking a test. When you know the answers and you feel pretty good about it, you're pretty relaxed.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to do pretty good on it. But you go in there and you're kind of up in the air. You don't know the material and all. It's hard to do as well. And that's the same thing with this young quarterback, Dwan Mathis, is, like he's been out there been around there for 2 months, and everybody expects him to do all these checks and do all these things. I was encouraged by his athleticism, the way he can avoid the rush, and if we were in a position that he would be having to play because of something happened to Jake, obviously we would have to adjust a little bit because Jake's got a 3-year head start on him and all the stuff he can do. But we could adjust some things that this guy could do fairly quickly as compared to, last year Fields was – maybe in a little bit more advanced system coming out of high school. I wouldn't want to get into that part, but I do like this guy's athleticism, and he did throw some errant passes early, but he was a little bit nervous the first time out there in the stadium, and I was glad to see Coley go there and put his arm around him and say, look, I don't know exactly what he said, but he just basically told him, said, look, you don't have to complete every pass. But he was not sloppy with the ball from a standpoint throwing in the coverage and getting about 5 picks that he could have had with that kind of rush. But
absolutely,
I like the guy's demeanor. He looks kind of like a gamer when he got out there. He was moving around. He's got a long way to go for sure, but man, he can motor now, and he's got a good arm, and he's going to get better as he adjusts to the receivers. And he's not throwing to the same guys that Fromm's throwing to.
Very
Sure.
true.
These guys are having to.
So he has less time and not the same receivers. And apparently he did well. We heard
he looked a lot better 3-on-3 than he did when he was running with the twos against the ones. I mean, that's just – and I think they probably put Stetson in with the ones a little bit. But the other thing that was good to me is it wasn't all just pure scrimmage. There was some red zone activity working against each other. There was some pass scale early. There was some team pass, all that. So it wasn't all just take the ball on the 30 and see if you can go score. There was a few of those, but there was some situational.
Yeah, one of our guys said they did a lot of situational work. And
the kicking was superior to me. I mean, I've been to scrimmages before where when I coached, when after it was over, you're ready to cut your throat because you said, hey, if it gets fourth down, we can't punt. Or if it gets, we might make a field goal 1 out of 4 or something like that because your protection's breaking down, you're getting bad snaps, you're doing all that. But you got a guy here with special teams in Fountain who really is organized. They got those players out there. It was organized. They were getting the kicks off. They were rushing them and all, but, it just wasn't a sloppy-looking thing that afterward you're thinking, boy, this is a bunch of guys that hadn't really done much. But they looked like a well-oiled machine in the kicking game.
We got a couple questions here rolling in about the scrimmage. Gerald Shepard with one that I'm sure everybody's interested in. He says, was that picture of Cox and Beal a Photoshop?
No. One of our very trusted insider sources said that Cox and Beal, remember this is Robert Beal, Brenton Cox, guys who were arrested for possession, were running stadium steps. Now remember, this is a lot of George Letterman out there watching this thing go down. And that didn't get them out of punishment. I remember if you were a kid, when you were on punishment and guests came over, sometimes you got to be out of your room or whatever. We're not going to talk about this in front of the company.
Right.
So you pretend that you weren't in trouble. No, that did not happen with Kirby Smart. These kids were in trouble. Remember, this is going to be one of those handled internally type things. So they were running stadium steps, and apparently that wasn't quite good enough. They had to actually carry a table.
With Scott Sinclair.
With Scott Sinclair sitting on it or laying on it up and down the stadium steps. So
I missed that part, but I do feel like that the symbolism of doing the discipline in front of everybody was not so much for, to prove that we're doing it, but just, there's a little bit of humility involved in knowing that you're out there in front of all
That's
those
what
people.
I wrote, Coach. In my notes, I wrote, if you want to correct something, a little humiliation and a little back-breaking labor, it goes wonders for it. And again,
it's playing time. I mean, you're out there in a full uniform and everybody else is scrimmaging, and you got guys out there taking your reps.
Absolutely, no doubt.
At one of the most loaded positions on the team. I mean, you need to be out there fighting.
I think.
I mean, and this isn't – I'm not taking anything away from Charlie Warner, but Charlie's got a spot. He's experienced. There's nobody nipping at his heels. But if you're Brenton Cox and, Robert Beal especially, and you got Adam Anderson, Azeez Ojulari, guys like Nolan Smith throwing people around in that video.
Yeah.
So, Jermaine Johnson coming, you don't want to have any missed opportunities to impress your coach. So, if you're running up and down the stadium steps, that's brutal. So, yeah, that was not a Photoshop. Those guys were we didn't see anything with the table. But, yeah, those guys are running stadium steps in front of everybody, and it's humiliating.
I don't think, to me, though, if I'm Kirby Smart, that chaps me that somebody would take that picture.
I understand that.
I agree.
You shouldn't do that. You got a benefit of being in there, and I just don't think people should do that. I really don't. I think you're really taking away from a very good situation from Coach Smart letting you come and wanting you to be there, but it's not fair to do that.
It's not fair to him.
Especially when it says no video, no phones, no –
well, I will say this. During the open media session, which was, 8 minutes?
Yep.
We got period 2, whichever period it was, everybody on the sideline had video cameras or phones up and taking pictures nonstop. So I don't know how seriously they took that admonition not to do that. Or maybe they said, look, when the media comes out, you can do it then. But, I mean.
I think the one thing about your site, our site, since I'm helped a little bit, is – the fans want all this insider stuff and everything, but I tell you what, an insider is not doing justice to the football program when they're divulging what's going on out there, I don't think.
Well, and, you could say that about some of our war room stuff, but you'll notice there's nothing in there about formations, plays, anything that can be used against them. This is more, here's how so-and-so looked, here's how he
that's
what
fine,
he functioned.
I don't know, but I just think
if
somebody gets hurt at practice or somebody I think it all should come from Kirby.
Well, we did have a lot of we'll say this, if you go and check out UGASports.com right now, you can watch his post-practice scrimmage. You can see the stories.
He did a good job on that, telling you what happened.
Yeah, so he does give a lot of information, but we wanted more, so we asked around.
Of course. Charles Kaiser says, sounds like number 2 defense was stopping number 1 offense in scrimmage. Is that concerning? Usually D gels faster than offense, typically.
Doesn't worry me based on the fact they were running a lot of defenses out there, and they were trying to stop them. That was their goal, to hang tough against the run. So, that's why they gave up some big plays in the passing game too. So, I feel like I always wanted to feel like when you left the field that you felt good about your one offense and your one defense. I felt good about both of them when I was left there the other day because a lot of good plays. I don't know whether you mentioned it in the war room. I haven't read that, but the thing that was good too was open field plays. When our guys got a chance to put a guy on the ground, they do a good job of tackling.
I didn't mention that. Didn't hear that.
And they were good at doing that because, first day of really full-speed scrimmage, sometimes you miss a lot of tackles. And I didn't see that much.
No, I'm not worried about the number 1 offense, really. If they're struggling a little bit with the number 2 defense, it kind of concerns you. But at the same time, I'm thinking you're replacing 3 wide receivers.
You're banged up at the running back position.
Right. DeAndre Swift is not 100%. Brian Herrion, can he carry the load? I believe so. Zamir White is not back yet. James Cook can get it done, but, he's also been beat up a little bit.
Yep.
So, point being, you've got this great offensive line to run behind, but you're still working out your receiver rotations. And what we heard, the receivers actually scored. We heard Demetrius Robertson had a 40-plus yard reception. Kirby Smart was lamenting the fact that, some of those guys had some big plays, against his secondary. So, I'm not worried. I don't worry too much about anything, G-Day included, that happens. Because all it does is if there is an issue, it's identified and you have 4 or 5 months to work on it before you actually have to play a game.
Sure.
Now, if you tell me there's a big Georgia couldn't stop the run in the last scrimmage before your first game in fall camp, now I'm worried. I'm like, really? The number 1 defense couldn't stop the number 2 offense, and when they were running the ball, that gets you some.
G-Day will be controlled a little bit because they won't. They open up at Vanderbilt, and they don't want to have a. That'll be on the SEC network or whatever it'll be as far as our G-Day game, and they'll have all that tape. So there'll be more personnel evaluation by Vanderbilt than what our schemes are. But I like the fact that a couple things here that we've mentioned, and then we'll get some more questions, is your installation of because you need to know your proper technique and your assignment if you're going to play a position. So you need to learn what the play is and how you want to do the technique for it. So back in the old days, we would have spring practice and then we'd have fall camp. But now, between signing date and spring practice, they have a period of mental stuff where they go through walkthroughs and all that, which is perfectly legal now, 8 hours a week. So you've got that to learn those things. Then you have spring practice to do it, the day of the practice, and then the walkthroughs on other days when you have some time. Then after that, then you got a little break, and then you have exams, and then you come back, and you're here in May, and you do the same thing. And then you take a break, and then you come back for summer school, and then you do it again, and then you come back, and then you have fall camp. So you have all these at least 4 times, maybe 5, that you relearn everything all over again before you even play a first game. So that's why we're so far along here. It's just plus you add all the work that some of these younger guys did during the practice for the bowl.
Yeah, that's very true. And we've seen those guys, like you said, the 14 early enrollees that you already had mentioned, those guys are getting it now. So I'm quite impressed with that. I do want to mention something else very impressive. Our folks at Athens Ford, now that it's April, we mentioned from numerous weeks there we were talking about the March specials. Well, the new April specials are out. And the first one that caught my eye was the 2019 Ford F-150 models. All their F-150s, all the different packages. They have the 0% financing for 72 months. That's a long time to never pay interest on a vehicle.
Yeah, no doubt.
So you're not paying an extra $2,000, $3,000 in finance charges. So 0% financing for qualified buyers for 72 months. Now, of those different F-150s, the XLT 302A Crew Cab, which is that really special one, I really love that one, you have another option of getting $13,250 off that one. You do 0% financing or get the $13,250. That's a 2019. I'm not talking 2018. We're talking 2019's. The Ford F-150 XLT 302A Crew Cab, $13,250 off. I also like the Ford Explorer, which is what I'm driving. The 2019 is now $9,000 off.
Oh, you might have to go upgrade again.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, subscribe to UGASports.com. It's only 27 cents a day, but if we get enough people,
yeah, right.
we can get it with that new 2019. Again, $9,000 off of that is pretty impressive. And this one, I was thinking I remember if I go back, I was trying to decide between the Explorer and the Escape. The Escape now, the 2019 Ford Escape is now down. You can think of this as 2019. It's under $19,000. It's $18,600. So you can get a 2019 for less than $19,000. I mean, it's and that Escape is a fantastic deal. So you get a chance, try that. Swing out by Athens Ford. They also have some great service specials right now. If you get a chance, you've got to try those folks. They do wonderful, wonderful work out there.
All right, so let's hop into some of these questions because we got some good ones here today. A couple in the same vein here, so I'll kind of roll them into one. Chris Metcalf says, who are some surprise players like Stokes was about this time last year? And then Araj, our buddy Araj says, after these practices, who are some of the players the proverbial light has seemed to come on for?
I would say the name I've heard a lot from offensive guys and defensive guys has been Matt Landers. Just kind of popped out there. I'm not saying the lights come on for him. I'm just saying there's a guy who that name has popped up a lot more. Of course, we saw Jamari Sawyer running with the ones. That was they're trying him at a bunch of different spots. But heard good things about John Fitzpatrick as well. But
well, that's a big one. They really need him to come on.
Yeah, I've heard good and bad things about Amir Speed. This is from the coaches.
Sure.
I've heard the coaches, hey, great job, Amir. Amir, you're not doing this right. And so it's but here's the thing. When you're not hearing a kid's name called a lot, I call it, go back to when Kirby Smart was all over Richard LeCount as a freshman, just chewing him up every practice. And you're thinking, Richard LeCount is the worst recruit Georgia's gotten in 10 years. But, that's because Kirby wanted him to go. When Kirby was all over Eric Stokes, you're like, He's trying to run off this three-star kid, No, it's because he wants him to start. If you're getting attention from Kirby, if Kirby's on you, the other coaches are on you, that means they're expecting something from you. So I'd rather be yelled at by the coaches, than not hear my name called. And we've heard a couple of those guys pop up there. And of course, I'm hearing a lot of great things about Stetson Bennett.
Sure.
So
you and you mentioned J.R. Reed earlier, the role that he kind of you saw him take on Saturday. That's a guy that in the practices that I've been to, it seems like the coaches are staying on very heavily from that respect of, hey, we need a leader back here. We need a guy who's going to take charge of this. And I think that he certainly played some of that role last year. But again, you had some of those older guys still to rely on. They need J.R.
Well, DeAndre Baker was the unquestioned leader of that group, but you need that guy to step up. And what does Kirby Smart mention in every press conference is he's looking for those leaders. Again, and I know a lot of people kind of roll their eyes and they leadership. You don't understand how important it is because coaches get on players all the time, almost to the point where the players don't hear them.
Yeah.
You see a guy, he's coming off the field, coaches yelled at him, he's just walking straight to the water bucket, He's used to being yelled at. But another player comes and grabs him by the face mask and says something to him, pats him on the back, either chews him out or builds him up. Another player doing it, it's night and day. Just like Coach always mentions when you're having kids come onto campus to be recruited. When the other kids are recruiting you to come, it means 10 times as much when the coach does it. So they're looking for those leaders, and I think you mentioned, like you said, J.R. Reed, Richard LeCount can do that. I would say Eric Stokes, but I don't know if he just cracks jokes the whole time or not. I don't know. I mean, he should be a leader, but he's very young. But you need those upper upperclassmen who can do that.
CJ,
Well, you got a couple guys that I would mention, from that standpoint that really stepped up to me, like Marc Webb, who, has been waiting for an opportunity to be a little bit more prominent. I think he's a guy that is a lot like Swift. Both of them, have command a lot of respect from the fellow players. And the thing about leadership, you got to have followership too. You got to want to follow these guys, and it's not just
Good point.
Not just yelling and screaming on there or pointing out things on the field. It's the way you work in the weight room. It's what you do going to class. It's what you do with your off the field, because that's the standards that Kirby has. So some of these guys are kind of silent from that standpoint, and that they set the standards, and they don't really question authority. They just do what they're supposed to do, where sometimes people will, why are we doing this? What are we doing? And I think, as we mentioned last week when Tyson Summers told me, that it just seems like that a lot of these guys that were maybe a little bit immature early have the lights gone on, because they can see the benefit of the discipline that they've been able to use, and they're really are not a deterrent on having that get them to do it. They're actually doing it. So you spend more time giving them a little love than you do getting on their butt, because they're already doing what you're supposed to. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely. No doubt.
You got it, man.
You mentioned Marc Webb. I should have pointed out that, again, at one point, Kirby Smart yells for Marc Webb to come out there and work at star with him. This is Kirby Smart working with Devod Wilson and Marc Webb at that star spot. So, yeah, I left him off the list, but that is a guy who, again, if Kirby's working with him personally.
And you got Tyreek McGee there. You got three guys that all-star type guys that, can play that, can play corner. And
knock your block off, Tyreek.
And you got those inside guys, too, that really have developed that, Crowder and Monty Rice and Tyndall and Walker, not to mention we talked about the way N'Kobe can move around. And he's a little bit ahead of things from a standpoint of just really knowing what to do very quickly. And I'd say the same thing with Clay Webb. Clay having been here in for the early days of the bowl practice. I would say Clay Webb is a guy that's sticking out a little bit for me too.
Excellent. That's
no surprise.
I mean, yeah, sure.
But he's
it's a
loaded spot.
He's among the forest there. He's in the trees.
He's absolutely loaded.
I think it's hard to look at a younger guy and project him in there because of the abundance of players. And we don't play two full lines. We play. We'll rotate a guard or rotate a tackle, but I could see us maybe doing that some next year, particularly against some of the teams we're going to play. But you never know how they're going to develop. But
Coach is predicting a complete line change against Vanderbilt.
You heard it here first.
Heard it here. Tweet it out. That's what you just said.
Oh Lord.
He's never doing the show.
No, this is. I want to hit on this one real quick before you jump into this, because this goes along with that. CJ Oren with a question that I think a lot of people have. He says, "Have you spotted anybody who's standing out on the defensive line?" He said that's really my only worry for next year. This guy was not participating on Saturday, but he was visiting. Boy, Trayvon Walker, he was looking good walking around there, wasn't he? He looked like he could hop right in and mix it up with those guys. So
very pleasant kid too. And
yeah, he's a great kid. And his dad, former Marine, so he ain't gonna play.
He kind of looks like he would just grab a quarterback and just like rip arms off and legs, just like a toy.
The D line though has kind of got a burr in their saddle because everybody's talking about them and everything. But I think Clark's really, sees the handwriting on the wall. If he really gets after it, there's a good shot. He wants to go to the next level. And he's playing hard. And you got Davis fighting his weight a little bit, but he is a man now. He is huge presence now. Yeah. Have you ever seen him just on the hoof without his pads on?
Yeah, he's.
I'm sure you have, but he is massive. And then some of those other guys inside are working hard. It's just an area that, and I think they got to be happy listening to Kirby about the way they did stop the run. You can't stop the run without some kind of D line doing the job. So. Hopefully that'll be something we continue, and then all of a sudden, well, what about the pass rush? But, who knows? That's something they'll work on maybe more this week. Maybe playing some more pass coverage and not so much worrying about, so you're getting your team ready. That's what you're doing.
Sure.
To answer his question, though, I have actually heard some good things about Michael Thornton.
I'm sorry?
I mean, Michael Barnett.
Okay.
Sorry.
Who is he?
Michael Barnett. He's actually, I've heard some good things about him this spring camp. Now, remember, this is a guy who's bounced from defensive line, offensive line, came back, played a lot more towards the end of last year, but Barnett this spring, I've heard, has had a pretty good spring. Again, this isn't from what we were watching him go through drills. It's all secondhand. All of our war room was secondhand, but the buzz, if you will, to name one name right there, I would go with that. I also want to see how Wyatt does.
Yeah, Devontae.
He's come around. He has, and Waldtower too. The one thing that I would interject to that maybe sounds a little silly after I talked about all the things we do to get ready for the year is, the timing, the 4 installations, but we run more plays in practice and in a scrimmage than we would have when we do in 3 games. You know what I mean? So there's a lot more opportunity to be successful and to fail in the practice than it is in the game. Because
that's what our guys stressed about the secondary. He said, there were some big plays against the secondary, but if you run that many plays, he's like, you can't cover.
Right.
A guy, and he didn't give me an estimate how many plays he did, but he said they were, because he mentioned all the, the 11 on 11, then all the situational work. He's like, you're gonna get scored on in that.
So and particularly D linemen, the 2 places where we play more snaps, and we talk about that Pro Football Focus that has the grades and the amount of times they're in the game. But the O-line and secondary, there's not a lot of subbing except, maybe some dime and nickel people. But the D-line and interior people, we roll those guys. They might, 30, 35 plays. Running back, same thing. Receivers, same thing. So these guys are getting a humongous amount of reps out there. And, hey, let's say a guy completes 7 out of 10. That's pretty good for a quarterback, but then he throws a couple that aren't great, then everybody's talking about that. Or if a receiver catches 4 but drops 1, talk about a lawyer. Well, I won 2 cases, but I lost another one. And doctor, he had one guy make it through open heart, the other one died. But
well, and last thing on the D-line here, I thought what Kirby said about Jordan Davis, obviously no surprise that he's a guy who's really, still continuing over from that great freshman year. But I thought what Kirby had to say about him on Saturday was super complimentary. And it may not sound like it from first blush. He said, look, this isn't a guy who's super fast. He's not really explosive. He said, but this is a guy that you need in the SEC in order to stuff the run.
Well, he said he was just a mountain of a man to try to get around. But he also mentioned, in a previous presser that Jordan wasn't up to the standard that he was towards the end of last season. So
I heard he's back, though. I'm going to take it.
I'm about to say,
But I think one thing Kirby does, though, as much as he motivates them and gets on them and does things, he gives them the love, too. But there's kind of a special Nick Chubb selling cars now.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So saw that up on the deal, but we need to get him to Athens Forum. But here's the deal. If you got a guy that was on the scout team that really wasn't counted on to do anything, and you're jumping him 3 or 4 weeks into the season about keep going hard, working hard, you'll be ready. And then he did that, and look where would we been without him last year?
Oh,
but that's what Kirby will tell these guys, that look, when you're not getting the reps and you're worried about what's going on and are you working on the scout team and all that, look at Jordan Davis. Look what he did. Yeah. And I really admire that myself.
Look at Tay Crowder. Look at Michael Barnett. Sure. I mean, there's a lot of guys. Look at Eric Stokes. There are a lot of guys. DeAndre Baker. DeAndre Baker didn't get into the game until Georgia was getting killed at Ole Miss, and he had to come in for what was that guy's name? The long dreads.
Jawan Briscoe?
Yeah. So, I mean, you're going to get your shot. Anyway, speaking of getting your shot, I'll give a big shout out.
With the names, man.
Because I can't remember any names. Hit 46 and they all disappeared. I want to give a shout out to Aaron Overhead Doors. I was looking through their service areas because I actually had somebody, they wrote me on Facebook the other day, said, are they in my area? And I said, we don't mention that enough, that they are kind of in the Northeast Georgia area. But people are listening to our show all over the world. So I clicked on it and says, if you're looking, here's some areas where we do things. And then they had a list of reviews from these areas. So let's go down them. You can they'll come out to Barrow County, Habersham County, Hall County, Cobb County, Dawson County, DeKalb County, Jackson County, Forsyth County, North Fulton County, Gwinnett County, Stevens County, Walton County, White County, and there's just hundreds and hundreds of reviews here. And I like the summary of it was from over 519 customer service reviews. They are rated 5 out of 5 stars.
There you go. And it's,
I don't know what else I can tell you besides that.
It's kind of a corridor in between 85 and 75, that North Atlanta area. That's going to be your largest piece of the service area.
I think Jefferson, Snellville, Marietta, up to Gainesville, those guys will come out and do it. And even if you're anywhere close,
give them a buzz, man.
Yeah, just let them know, and they'll let you know if they come out there, and I guarantee you they're going to say yes. Because Ryan, Lucy, and the folks out there, again, they're big into customer service, and big shout-out to them for sponsoring our show and our website.
Charles Kaiser here with a really good question, and that's a guy that I think a lot of people are kind of looking at this year, especially given the absence of Mecole Hardman and Terry Godwin. He says, will Kearis Jackson be a breakout guy this season? I think that he's got a very good chance to do so. I think that he's a very physical wide receiver. I know that Kirby and the guys love that. He's a very willing blocker. He's great with the ball in the air, and he's got a lot of speed. I mean, he's got a lot of things working in his favor that I think can make him a big part of this offense.
Here's the thing about the guy that I just love. He, starting next fall, will be a freshman eligibility-wise. He's played in college games. He will have had 2 spring practices, 2 summer camps under his belt before he even starts using it against his eligibility. That 4-game rule is awesome.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I'm telling you, looking back on all the guys that I've coached, it's just got to be a big plus for these guys because it makes them feel good knowing that, hey, I can't ever even get in a game. I can't do anything, because that's the rule. I'm going to lose my eligibility. But look at Devon Wilson. This Devon and
Aziz Ojolari
and Kiaris. Just the fact that they got him back there looking at him returning punts shows you that Kirby's got a little confidence in him. You know what I mean? Here's a true will be what you call now a redshirt freshman out there. And he's got a little moxie to him. I mean, I liked him the first day when you went down there and did that interview with him when he signed. I mean, it's just something about him.
Kid's fearless.
That I just like. He wants to be a dog.
And, he loves Georgia.
You can't beat that fire, and ability-wise. I know Chaney used to have some plays last year early when they thought he might play all year where they called the formations grouping, and they added, where there was, I don't know what they call it, Jackson or Kiaris or what, but he was the guy in at that one position for that play because he could do it, even though he better than the ones we had.
Yeah.
So, to me, with all the receivers we had, and they were still looking at him as the one they wanted to run that play, I think that speaks volumes for you.
I didn't know that. That's big.
Chaney was going to call you about it, but he forgot to.
I'm sure he lost my number.
The only reason I knew it was because I was just standing out there one day. And,
you'd mentioned in your
and I heard him say something, blah, 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 Kiara. I said, what does that mean? And some guy on the sideline said, well, that means we want to focus. Kiara is the guy that's got to go in at that position. And I'm sure they got that with other guys too.
Yeah, you got to think that there were numerous times they would call, like, they put in that formation and they put in Tyler Simmons to run that jet sweep because the guy could do it. I wouldn't mind seeing Kiaris run that because
give me the right pronunciation for him.
Which one?
Is it Kiaris or Kiaris?
I think it's Kiaris. That's what I've always. He's never corrected me. It's not like a Rick Gilbert situation.
Well, number 10.
There you go. Number 10 in your hearts. Number 1 in your. Or number 10 in the program. Number 1 in your heart.
I think people forget the fact that he is one of the strongest kids on the team, pound for pound.
Oh, no question. There's no doubt about it.
I mean, he'll put up some Thomas Brown type numbers in the weight room.
And he and Robertson both benefited from being under the tutelage of Coach Hankton or whoever the receiver coach would have been. But getting that kind of advanced coaching, to me, has helped their nuances of releases. I tell you, going against our secondary every day really gets you ready. Just like Alabama's receivers going against their secondary, Clemson, the same thing. But they go against quality guys all the time, and it's self-survival out there. If you can't get off the line, you're going to get the dog manure beat out of you.
Yeah, and you got to think he's lining up, I'm assuming against Devon Wilson.
Yeah,
would be the guy lining up across from him. Then Marc Webb.
Yeah, we don't need to typecast him as a slot.
No, I'm just saying
he can play outside.
That's what I'm assuming right off the bat, just because you got Jeremiah Holloman out there at one spot, and I'm assuming maybe Tyler Simmons, Demetrius Robertson maybe at the other. So in his initial forays into that starting lineup, maybe he's in that slot. But point being, he's got to fight those guys off. If not, if he's outside, then he's got to run step for get away from Eric Stokes and Tyson Campbell, two of the fastest guys in the nation. So he's got a physical fight.
And Stevenson.
Yeah, and Tariq Stevenson, 5-star. Point being, you got two major types of secondary guys he has to get rid of, and if he can do that as a freshman,
not bad.
Yeah, not too bad. So I'm not worried about
real quickly here in a synopsis, we lose 3 really good receivers plus Crumpton. So we lose those 4 guys. But all of a sudden, you got Jackson and you got Landers, who are doing pretty well this spring, and then you got Robertson, who's coming back and doing pretty well, and then you add the guys coming in, Blaylock and Pickens, and then our first 3 maybe Holloman, Simmons, and Robertson, whoever they could go another way, but that's pretty good looking, as they would say in some places. That's a pretty good looking room.
Yeah, no doubt. And Matt Landers, I will say it's taken some time for him, but I'm not surprised to hear that he's doing well. They had high hopes for him coming in. I know, big kid, super physical player. I loved him when he was in high school. Great tape. Go back and watch those high school highlights of that young man.
I tell you what was impressive about I didn't watch the whole time. I was shooting the breeze over there with all these guys, but I was standing down there in the end zone, and he caught one pass, and then you saw him run, but then the next time I was standing on about the 30 when he caught one, and then he showed this guy's tail lights to the end zone. And you can get a good feel for how guys move in there. I mean, I'm 74, and my eyes aren't real good, but that guy was smoking.
Please. I'll put your eyes up against anybody's out there. Speaking of things I'll put up against anybody out there, I will take Academia Brewing Company, their beer. We had a friend of ours, a family, come in this past weekend. I had some Academia beer at the house. He's an author. If you get a chance, check out Isle of Fog. It's a great series of books for basically coming of age, so young adults of fantasy novels. Get a chance, check out Keith Robinson and Isle of Fog. They were in town, and Keith is a British guy. I sat him down with some of the Academia beer. This is a guy who's used to going to a local pub, having great beer, back in London. He loved it, and I sent him home with a ton of Academia beer, and now I am his best friend.
Yeah, I bet.
So, Keith and Vanessa, they're great folks, and they came in and they tried the Academia beer. Absolutely loved it. So, and again, he had no idea what it was. This was a blind taste test, if you will. I didn't tell him that, hey, here's somebody who sponsors our show, because we picked up some beer when they were doing the canning thing. Poured it for him. He started raving about it. Where is this? Who is this from? Of course, all in a British accent, which makes it sound much cooler. And I'm like, no, okay. So I explained it then. I just wanted to get his genuine, authentic reaction to it. He could have said, oh, this is terrible. And Keith would do that. I mean, he's a good guy. He's not going to sugarcoat anything. And he'd say, I don't really care for this. But he loved it. It was the Skol, the Belgian wheat. And so he loved it.
Absolutely.
So, I knew it was good. So, but again, it was just nice to have somebody who had no preconceived notion actually try that beer and love it. Now, I didn't send him with any of my Hunker Down Brown.
Stash.
No,
Yeah.
he didn't get any Hunker Down Brown. I love you, Keith, but you're not getting that. And of course, right now, for everybody who keeps talking about the great IPAs and the hoppy beer, we have the Hopperdesiac.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, I like it. And you know me, I'm not the huge hoppy guy. I can drink this beer, and I've said that it's better than Tropicalia, and I'm sure people are going to scream at me, but we had some folks that went out to the Athens Beer Festival this past Sunday. They sent me notes about how much they liked what Academia had out there. So, again, get a chance, I'm going to say it. That's fantastic. Also, before we get to any more questions, I want to mention Europie. It's where I had lunch last Friday.
Nice.
You just can't
You eat
beat.
there every Friday, don't you?
No,
It's
starting to because I have a long day on Friday with until I have to pick up the boy from practice, and this Friday you kind of like, where am I going to go for lunch? You just can't beat it because you can get something different just about every time you go. So get a chance, swing out by Europe. Again, 60 locations, 50 more coming. I got to get an update on that. We've been saying that for about a month now. They probably opened 10 of them, but point being, you get a chance, swing out by Europe. They have beer, they have ice cream, they have sandwiches. It's all incredibly fresh, right there, made in front of you. It's nothing under a heat lamp. It's perfectly customized the exact way you want it. You want 4 olives on there, they will put 4 olives on there. So
I got a question for you, man.
Okay. Go for it.
Who you think's going to drop for the Dogs in the next week or so?
Oh boy, good question for
next
sure.
10 days.
A lot of hoops around.
in 10 days we'll have G-Day.
A lot of hoops around G-Day.
Get out on the ledge and stand on one leg and tell me 2 or 3 you're going to drop.
The names that I'm still feeling good about, I do think that there is still a pretty strong chance with Burton. Jermaine Burton, 4-star receiver out in California. I have heard
that'd be a pull from across the country.
I have heard that LSU really impressed him on the official visit, but that was a team that I think not necessarily was making up ground, but it seemed like Georgia and Alabama kind of had some momentum ahead of them. So it may be a visit high thing. We'll see.
That's good.
But Burton definitely a guy to watch, especially if he makes it to G-Day, because he's planning on committing on the day of. So and
it's
then
also Terrence Edwards' birthday, right?
I'm sorry.
It's also Terrence's birthday.
It's Terrence's birthday.
So,
and that's his mentor.
I cannot imagine, and this is aside here, coming to G-Day and then committing to LSU.
Yeah, sure.
That's what I'm saying. Tacky. That would be tacky.
Come on, man. You're doing good.
And I'm going to give you another name here, and this is a guy who's visited recently. We spoke to him prior to the visit. Just a guy that you need to watch, and that's Akinola Ogunbiyi. I think that this is a kid who has – right.
4-star, man.
4-star Rivals 250 kid out of Sugar Land, Texas.
Do you read your site? This guy's on fire. I mean, this guy's out of Sugar Land. Supposed to go visit Oklahoma, and then if he doesn't go there, we got a shot. Tell us about it.
Yeah, no, that's the word I've gotten.
You had 30 freaking updates from Charlotte this past weekend.
Well,
I can't keep up with all this.
He wasn't in Charlotte.
He was
here.
Your pie.
He was, but Akinola, definitely a kid to watch. A lot of people believe that Oklahoma is the team to beat. They think that he's been leaning there a lot.
Sugar Land's near Houston, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and but they felt confident about that. What I've been told is that the sources I've talked to believe that if he makes it through this visit to Oklahoma, Georgia's got a very, very strong chance.
Who would you compare him to that we got?
6'4", 315. He's an interior guy. I mean,
Roddy.
You're looking at
about 6 inches short.
You're looking at I would say probably a guy built similarly to. I mean, that's not too far off of how Jamari's
I was about to say, that's Jamari Sawyer.
So, I think that, and he is an interior guy. I've spoken to some folks out in Texas who've watched him. I said, is this a tackle situation? The big thing about him, which is very intriguing as well, is that Akinola is very good friends with another offensive lineman out of Texas named Smart Chabuzo. And Smart is a guy who has visited Georgia, really high on him, kind of up in the air whether he's a tackle or an interior guy, but another Rivals 250 guy, currently committed to A&M, but definitely a guy to watch because those two are very tight.
6'5", 311.
All right, how about Tate Ratledge?
Oh, boy. Now, Tate Ratledge,
I'm just shooting it out there, too, man. I love to get you stuff.
Yeah. Tate is a guy who, listen, I think
close before.
I think if there's a battle that Georgia wants to win as bad as any, and I would say it's him and Miles Murphy. And full disclosure, I still don't feel great about the Miles Murphy thing. I am starting to feel much better about their chances with Tate Ratledge. I think that Tennessee.
We got Kirby and Pitt on these guys. I mean,
wasn't that the guy that Carson Beck was going after?
Tate?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's been after everybody though.
Well, I'm just saying. I think when we mentioned he's like the one player that you think commits to Georgia.
Oh
next.
yeah. Tate
he
Ratledge.
said Tate. So. I'm thinking that Carson might have a little insider information.
If you could add him and Broderick Jones together in this class,
there's your two tackles.
Those are your two tackles, and that's
exactly.
And I feel like that's an Isaiah Wilson, Andrew Thomas pair.
He looked good at those drills too when you had him. But
Strong.
Then how many interior guys do you think?
Our fans like that though, just to give us those three. Just makes my mouth water.
Charles Kaiser with a good question here. He says, "How about Keely Ringo? What are the Dogs' chances?" Now, Keely set Twitter on fire the other day. 5-star receiver out of Saguaro in Arizona. So you think, what's the deal here? This kid, very interesting situation for him. His mom works for an airline, so he flies for free everywhere. It's not a big deal for him to take all these visits across the country. But Keely got on Twitter the other day, said, "Hey, package deal to UGA. Who's with it?" Got some responses from Justin Flo, I believe. He reached out to a 5-star linebacker.
5-star linebacker.
Another 5-star linebacker, Michael Sherman, out of the D.C. area. He was in on it. So people, there's some buzz going around, nationally right now.
That's easy to say though, and that stuff. But I like
it's easy to troll.
I like those other three that you were just.
Sure.
And what
you just
what
like
about
linemen?
I'm just going to tell you this. What about
Chilardos?
What about when you were up there at Charlotte, there at Ford High School, doing all those deals? Anybody that just knocked your socks off?
A kid that I really loved, and I know a lot of people want to talk about Justin Flo, 5-star linebacker, Upland, California. Look, that's going to be a tough pull regardless. Always is to pull a kid from that far away. The kid that I would really, really watch, though, if things don't go the way you want with Flo, is Trenton Simpson. I think that he is a guy that Georgia has been in on heavily. Glenn Schumann's recruiting him. Tremendous
Tell us where he's
athlete.
From and who he is, huh?
Now he's from Mallard Creek High School, and if that sounds at all familiar, they're a powerhouse in the Charlotte area. But they're also very familiar, should be familiar to Georgia fans because of Jordan Davis. Big Jordan Davis is a defensive tackle that came from there. And he and Trenton Simpson are communicating very frequently. We wrote about that
every day.
He said, this is a situation where this guy is telling me, he says, look, I know the coaches have to sell me on their program. They have to tell me what I want to hear to get me here. Jordan doesn't have that onus on him. He can give him the straight story. They're former teammates, and he says, he's getting a great education. He loves what they've done to develop him. He says, I think I could be the next guy that Georgia puts out. I think that I could be the next NFL caliber guy.
And
so watch out for Trenton Simpson.
You told me about it. I'm just going to let you talk, Rodney. My bad. But you told me about a receiver in the 2022 class that just made your mouth water.
Yeah, there was a kid in 2022 out of Greer, South Carolina.
Begins with S.
Jalil. I got to get. I'll have to look his name up again. But
when he walked up to the table, he made your mouth water.
Jalil Skinner. Yep.
Skinner. I knew
absolutely. Jalil Skinner out of Greer.
Just prompting you, man.
Just a kid who, this is a young guy, looks tremendous, and another young name for you to know. This kid's an 8th grader, but has visited and is getting some attention. Raheem Jarrett. A kid out of South Carolina. He's visited Georgia already.
Really?
Yeah, tremendous player. Had a great camp the other day. I was really impressed with
I was over at Piedmont Hospital yesterday, and I saw a kid that was born that was only 6 weeks old. Really got to get
That's what I told him.
Big hands, good measurables.
You wouldn't know. You would not know this kid was an 8th grader if you met him. I promise you that. A couple other recruiting questions here.
Good job. Good job. You right on top of that.
Charles Kaiser says,
so you guaranteed 3 commitments, right?
Yeah, that's
me. That's what I heard.
He says, it looks like Miles Murphy and Brian Breesy are slipping away to Clemson. What are your thoughts? I do think that that's the case. I think that those guys are trending Clemson pretty heavily. And look, the reality of the situation is Georgia has to change. Well, and Georgia has to change the narrative about the defensive line. It's been a while since they've had a guy drafted. I think that this class has a chance to help them with that.
You've Jordan Jenkins, right?
Yeah, I think it was even. Gosh, yeah, I guess it was Jordan. But I think that you got Ledbetter's going to have a shot this year. I think that he should get picked up. But it's been a while since they've had anybody drafted. It's been a while since they put anybody on the SEC first team. So, there's a narrative there that other teams can sell. And so Georgia, the onus is on them to change that on the defensive line.
Yeah, and particularly Clemson with all those guys, they're getting drafted from their place. But
exactly.
We're going against the big daddies. I mean, you're going to go against Alabama and Clemson. That's going to be it. You're going to lose some guys, but, the ones we're after, the national prominence that we're involved with, when you're talking about a receiver from out in Arizona, and then a defensive back from California you were talking about the other day. I mean, then we got, we just signed
two offensive linemen in Texas.
Just signed a defensive back from Texas last year. So I mean, come on, it's good. We got to. But the thing about everybody worrying about it, it's good. You got from the standpoint. It's good to have the banner and talk about, but I would say after 3 straight years of just knocking them dead, that don't waste your time worrying about too much. Enjoy the Masters, do all that stuff, and our recruiting is going to take care of itself. I mean, we got 5-star recruiters working for us, and we got arguably the best director of player personnel in the United States, and Marshall Malcolm. He's a great evaluator. I mean, this guy, and when he puts his stamp on a guy, the guy can play. When he's a little bit up in the air, I mean, he's got a knack. And and what I like about him is this guy. He'll say, "Well, he'd be a good guy, but not he's not good enough for us," or something. He doesn't tell me that per se, but the point is, we're really selective, man. We're selective.
And you have to be at this point. And Chris Metcalf here with a good point. He says, hey, look, recruiting the last 2 cycles at this time, things didn't look great, and he's exactly right. But Kirby Smart finished strong like bridge cable is what he says, and he sure did.
But the thing that happens, though, most of the really good programs don't have a lot of great commits at this point because they got so many places to look at.
Your flow kid is not going to commit that early in the process.
Sure.
Your top guys are going to, Brian Breesy isn't committing tomorrow.
Yeah.
He's going to wait a while.
Yeah.
I get it.
But how about us being in on a guy from Maryland like that? And we're in a couple of others in Maryland.
Yeah, and several in Maryland.
Yeah, I mean, just unreal, really, to me. But I like the way you've come on. We could probably be on the show again next week.
I hope they'll have me
stuff,
back.
Roddy.
He's all right.
Hey, but good job down there in Charlotte. I mean,
if you didn't see it, you need to check out UGASports.com. And big shout out to Cable East for sponsoring our show. I really do appreciate that. But if you go to UGASports.com, there is a large thread, and we've already got 2 stories up, and we'll have many more coming from Jake's time in Charlotte. I never give him enough credit for all the traveling he's doing. Miami, Tampa, Charlotte, D.C. before long. We send him all over
Middle
the place.
East.
Yeah, that'll be me this summer. This guy, he's all over the place.
You going back again this year?
I got to go back again this year. Wedding.
Is that right?
Yep.
The pains of the elite.
No, the pains of going back to Cairo. Oh my God.
What are you going to give him
I'll find a kicker over there for us, though. I'm sure I'll find some soccer guy who can
give him a pyramid for the wedding present.
It'll be out by the pyramids. Yeah. So we'll. But Jake's been all over the place. He had a thread on the on the vault where we do all our recruiting talk. We have 2 big message boards. We have the dog vent, which is general topics, all Georgia football, and then we have the vault, which we had to create when. Our boy,
the Hey Chad board.
Basically, when Chad Simmons was working at UGA Sports, and there were just so many questions to Chad about recruiting, we basically created an entire board for just to talk recruiting. And on that, there is the thread from was it Saturday or Sunday? Sunday. The camp in Charlotte, and there's all these updates on these kids that mentioned Georgia. And with you talk about, do you take a kid from a flow from out in California, or do you take a kid out of North Carolina? North Carolina's been very, very good to Georgia football.
Absolutely.
So I got no problems with taking a kid out of North Carolina. And, again, you had kids from South Carolina, North Carolina, Georgia, all at that camp. And next Friday, we'll have the Georgia camp.
That's true. We'll be right ahead of G-Day.
So we'll have the Rivals camp in Atlanta.
Friday
night. So should have a lot of fun on that. So, again, if you want updates on – how many kids did you have in that kid?
I believe I had 7 in Charlotte, I think. And then we'll be looking forward to Atlanta. Should be a good one.
You had more updates than that thread, though.
I actually had an 8th one on a guy who wasn't there, but a guy that I picked up some good scoop on. You need to go check that one out because that's a big name to circle in your 2020 class.
So a lot of good information there at UGASports.com when you get a chance. Ooh, hey, we're out of time.
All right.
Any other questions you want to hit up?
We'll try to get to some of these next week. Let's go ahead and wrap it up today.
All right, folks. Just want to say thanks, of course, to Your Pie for letting Your Pie, Athens Ford, Champions on Backstreet, 11alive.com for letting us be on their site. Of course, our friends at Academia Brewing Company, and all the people at UGASports.com who keep us employed. So thank you very much for being a member of UGASports.com. We will talk to you next week at noon on Tuesday.
That's it for this episode of the UGA Sports Live Podcast. Tune in next week for more Georgia Bulldogs news and notes from Athens.